Hello, my name is Dr. Michael Jaff, coming to you from Delray Beach, Florida, in the United States. Welcome to Icarus. I actually don't really live here. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. However, this is where I got locked down when the state shut down its borders and travel in March 2020. Obviously, I have nothing to complain about, but would tell you that I now work for an amazing company, Boston Scientific, who has done a remarkable job managing 40,000 employees around the world safely and with empathy during this crisis. I wish you all great health and durability as we get through this pandemic.
Good morning from Seattle. Welcome to Icarus. My name is Ashley Hepner. I'm the Executive Director with the ISCVS.
Hello, I'm Danis Krens, vascular surgeon from Riga, Latvia.
This is Jan Skowronski from Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to Icarus.
Probably let's do that way that we do the quiz before we will start this roundtable discussion. Could you show us quiz number 10? It
and
will
a secret question?
The secret question is not, do you belong to any international endovascular organization? I mean the participants.
So as Will is putting the question on, okay, here it is.
We have it.
We had some challenges with voting. I don't know if we have some people voting. Okay.
Oh, 100% say no. Maybe not now. Zaskoczony?
Yes, it's very interesting that only 50% of the people are involved in any kind of endovascular society, even if we are vascular surgeon, cardiologist, doing the peripheral procedures. What do you think, Jan? Do you agree with me?
So let's talk a little bit about the premise of the whole session. We're on two continents. I think each continent has some strength and some weaknesses or challenges. And we thought we really need to do this session. Basically, I was thinking, what would I do if I was a 30 or 35 years old endovascular specialist? And I really want to do well. I want to do something fascinating, interesting. I want to be a researcher, or I want to just crank up cases every single day, six days a week, or I want to develop a new device. And I see, and you see, there's a little bit of a discrepancy that US medicine, especially the device industry, is strong. And I wonder whether we should discuss means of how can we help, assist, and collaborate across the continents. Like what American industry, device industry and pharma industry, but also the big universities can help younger operators who are maybe thousands of miles away. So that's the whole premise. And I think international organizations that group people of certain interest are certainly one vehicle. And I'm really looking forward to this session, and I'm honored that Michael Jaff, who has had absolutely illustrious but somewhat convoluted career, is going to chair it. So Michael was in private practice, then he was an academic physician at Massachusetts General Hospital. Now he is a big boss. He's president of endovascular division at Boston Scientific. And let's argue this. And we also invited Craig Walker, who's a key opinion leader, and we actually have one non-physician. We have Ashley Hepner, who is the executive director of International Society of Endovascular Specialists, and she's one of probably 10 smartest people I know in my life. But I cannot not take a shot that Ashley didn't provide her photo to the web page. And I don't know if we need to talk about it or not, but this discussion probably doesn't belong here. And we have Danis Krivens from Latvia. Like many people would have trouble figuring out where is Latvia? Do they even have enough patients to treat? Like how a guy from a relatively small country becomes this major powerhouse in clinical trials, and he speaks all over the world. He enrolls hundreds of patients into newest clinical trials. Like, how do you do it? So that's the type of advice that we want to give to people through this session. I talked too long. Greg, back to you.
No, I think that we can discuss the quiz, because do you agree with me that it's only 50% of attendees of our webinar who belongs to any endovascular society, and 50% of the people they don't. Maybe it's a good beginning of discussion. Why it happens? Why people are not interested to become a member? Do they see any chances, or do they think that they don't need it? What, Jeff? What do you think?
Thank you, Jan, for inviting me to this convention and to participate. I've always wanted to be in Poland. I thought I would actually be there. This is the closest I've gotten, so it gives me an opportunity in the future. And I'm thrilled to be joined by this panel. I've known Professor Cravens for a long time. He is clearly a internationally renowned expert. Craig Walker is kind of like the Michael Jordan of interventions. Everybody in the world knows him. He's certainly had an impact on my career, so it's great to have Craig here with me. And Ashley, I think we are going to go right to you, given that poll. You represent one of the most important international endovascular societies, and yet here's an audience that's got every reason to want to be a part of it, and yet many are not. Why do you think that is, and is that something we should be concerned about?
Right. I think that's a great question, and I also think there's a lot of facets there. So my first reaction is, I think branding is a thing, and you have so many societies around the world that it's difficult to know which one is going to offer you what you need. It's similar to what we're all going through right now, trying to figure out, do you use Zoom or WebEx or this platform or that platform for your teleconferences? You don't know which service is going to meet you where you are. So why I think ISCDS as a society needs to be more exposed to regions like Poland is we truly are a one-stop shop. So if you're going to join just one society, why not join the society where you can connect with people in any continent and in any sector related around endovascular medicine, be it industry or engineering or allied health or physicians themselves. So why people aren't joining societies, I think you've got a financial issue, especially straight out of school. You're not wanting to spend all this extra money on dues every year on top of everything else you have to worry about with student loans in the US especially. And additionally, I think there's a lot of milieu between professionals and politics, and you have these alliances, and if you're in one society, you can't join the other society because whoever your mentor is maybe won't appreciate that. I've noticed that in some European countries. So I think it's a complicated question, and something that perhaps some of the physicians in the group can shed some light on as well, as far as what motivates you to join a group, and beyond joining a group, what motivates you to stay.
Well, let me just start off. I've actually been introduced a lot in my life, never convoluted. So, Jan, I've got to kind of digest what you actually mean by that. I've had an interesting career. I'll start off just to provoke Craig and Professor Cravens. None of the moves I made were predetermined. I didn't have a plan that I drew up on a piece of paper when I was 30, thinking these are the steps I want to take to get to where I am. So, Professor Cravens, come from where you came, think back to when you got started. What did you want to do with your career when you started? How did you see yourself evolving as an expert?
Well, yeah, thank you. First, I'd like to thank Gregors and Jan for inviting for this very nice meeting. So, and I have to thank my mentors actually, and Chris Zerins, number one, who is my mentor, why I became vascular surgeon. I was exchange student at the University of Chicago at the beginning for some time, and then later I was lucky actually to join a group at Stanford to learn endovascular and vascular, and my mentors were Tom Fogarty, Mike Dake, and that was sort of way when there was fights between vascular surgeons and interventionalists, you know, and cardiac surgeons and all others. And I think it was my privilege to learn from everybody, because as coming from other continent, for me it was easy to learn from interventionalists, vascular surgeons, and I think it's very important for everybody to understand where you're going to learn from everybody, and then at the end to put together and to choose which specialty or which direction to go. So I think it's probably right time and right place and good people around, and probably that's would be a way how to choose.
Craig, how about you? Always you've got an amazing ability to teach, which is not a given. So you're great at that. So people want to learn from you, but let's face it, you didn't do this out of a metropolitan city. And so when you started out, what were your goals in your career as a young physician?
Sure. I was lucky enough to be at one of the first cardiology programs when angioplasty was introduced into the United States, and it actually had angioplasty. It was one of the first 10 sites. And so I started doing coronary interventions, but it became very, very obvious to me that coronaries and peripheral vascular disease go absolutely hand in hand. And there was a case very early on in my research fellowship at Harvard where I'd come in and done an urgent angioplasty on a patient who was in shock, and we placed a balloon pump. And this patient had very obviously an iliac stenosis. He had no blood pressure when he came in, so we had to put a balloon pump. But the patient's limb became ischemic because he had presented initially in cardiogenic shock. Even though we were able to open his vessels, the surgeons did not want to operate. I was a cardiologist at the time, and therefore no one said I could do an intervention at that time. And the long and the short of it was we saved that patient's life, but ultimately lost his leg. In a situation where had I been able to perform balloon angioplasty on an iliac, I could have easily saved that leg and life. And so I went to Dr. Brunwald and said, look, I need to be able to do peripheral interventions. This is just part of what I have to do to treat heart patients in certain cases. And he said, no way. Everyone else said, no way. But I kept persisting until I was able to do it. But then it became obvious to me that the relationship was much greater than that. Many patients with advanced cardiac disease have no cardiac symptoms because they simply can't walk very far. So I view atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease as a whole spectrum. And for me, being able to do what I like to do in the heart as well, I had to work in the periphery. Then I got very interested in limb salvage. And now I spend probably 80% of my time treating limb salvage cases sent to me really from all over the world. Just to give you an idea, yesterday I did 18 cases, of which 14 were limb salvage cases.
So Jan, how about you? You're in Birmingham, Alabama, and it's obviously become an important area in the United States for COVID. But let's go back to your young career. What were your goals? How did you see yourself making a mark as a physician?
I think my moves have not been planned, similar to what you just said. But I think I have at least a mindset of a lifetime student, that every year I try to learn something else. And since we are in procedural specialty, I don't think it has been a year that I haven't done something new, whether this is a TAVR or TCAR, and I learned peripheral arterial disease with the help of many esteemed leaders. But I think the discussion I'm hearing is that you really don't have to be at, let's say, Jagiellonian University or Sorbonne to do well and do kind of whatever you want. Even looking at geography of Professor Crevens or Craig Walker, and given the fact that we're in basically small global village, you can do anything out of basically anywhere. And I also believe, referring to what Ashley has said, since the world is shrinking, I think those global relationships and belonging to an organization, I also think it's an essential part of a career. I also believe, being a European, that the mentorship is very important, but I think it also can be very detrimental to someone's career. And putting it in very plain English, if you have a bad boss, especially if you're in Europe, you're in trouble and your career is in trouble. I think medicine is much more horizontal in the United States than it is in Europe. And I think if you have a bad boss in Europe, you should try to find other solutions for your careers and do things independently. And all kinds of collaborations are possible nowadays. Thank you.
So I just want to put out a few concepts here for the panel to respond to. In my experience, there are really three components that give you opportunity. One, Professor Crevens already mentioned, and that is listen to those around you who you respect. Learn from everybody. So I think that's one. Listen and learn from everyone who you can have the opportunity to do that on. Second, work really hard, particularly when you're young, you're looking to make a mark in your career. Just work really hard. And I'm not trying to sound like a grumpy old guy when I look at current trainees who look at their watch and say, I've already put in my 12 hours today and I'm leaving. I can tell you that, Craig, that's not how it was when you and I were training, and it held us in good stead to learn what it meant to work. So I think that's the second one, work really hard. And then the third one is really be open to raise your hand and say, I'll do that. So even if it's something you don't really know how to do, if the opportunity's there and there's a room full of people, raise your hand and say, I'll do that, because you'll figure it out. And then people will realize that you're eager to advance, eager to take on responsibility. So Ashley, one of the questions I wanted to think about with you was, if I'm a young physician looking to start my career and I join a professional international medical society, I look up at that banner and see huge name people like Craig Walker, like Denny Crevens, like Jan Skowronski, and like Ted Dietrich. And I think, well, I'll never get there. How am I going to climb this ladder? How does a society like yours think about embracing and enhancing the opportunities for young early stage physicians?
Right. This is a topic we're actually really excited about lately as a society, because we have a program called the Young Endovascular Specialist Program. So this was something that was originally drafted by Dr. Chris Zarins and Jason Lee about 10 years ago for the society that we've reintegrated. And what that looks like for the early career operators is up to them. Part of my role here is to approach people who have a vision of where they want to go. Whether or not they have a sense of self-efficacy in that endeavor, that's our job, is to increase their sense of self-efficacy by providing resources. But I think on the operator's side, know what you want and have some idea of how you'd like to get there. And what we do for these early career folks is we do connect them with mentors that they seek, whether it's virtually or whether it's inviting them to a meeting or giving them an opportunity to present an abstract. It can take many different forms. It just depends on what they're passionate about. Because if we were to have a rigid formula of what we do for young operators, it would not work for everybody in that way.
So Professor Crevens, you're at Stanford, you're learning from who are now viewed as giants in the field. You're gaining all this knowledge. How do you go from that point to starting your own career? What were the steps that you took and the thought process that you went through?
Yeah, thanks. First, I would like to put the first point to your previous, Michael, what you said about the steps. The first would be young people should evaluate dogmas and all stereotypes. because many people are very happy with some treatment standards, etc., and sitting like in the box, and then feeling comfortable with that, you can spend all your life. So, and I would recommend to go out of this box and reevaluate all these dogma standards. Even they're true, may be true, but with the time, many things change. And I remember how many changes it had with different treatments from 90s and every 10 years. And that's probably would be my recommendation to young guys. And coming back to your question, like, well, yeah, I had choice maybe to stay in the States and have my career over there. But then I felt maybe it's nice to have all my learn what I learned in the States and proceed back in Europe. So, and in that time, Latvia as a young country was really open for opening of the boxes. And the first thing probably was when I came back to get good team. And what I learned from other places when the things are not going always so well, you need really good relations between all team members. And I'm very proud that in Riga, Latvia, we had very good team consisting from vascular surgeons, invasive radiologists, and we have excellent research lab. And putting all this together, working in one direction, I think that's a secret why we actually could do many things, and from first in man, CE marks, and develop many products. And again, when we do something, we are not just doing the protocol or just doing some cases, but we are trying to find what's the best solution and how to develop the product. And that's probably the most interesting part, is this development. When the commercial guys come in, then it's probably getting boring and not so much development. But up to the level when it's done by engineers and beginning of this all development is probably most interesting part, at least for me.
Craig, it's obvious you have a passion to teach. And I know that people come to your lab all the time to watch and learn from you. Obviously, New Cardiovascular Horizons has become an international place for people to learn. How'd you get into that? What made you kind of drive yourself not only to teach, but to become an expert at teaching?
Well, first, I couldn't agree more first with what Professor Cravens just said. We must always question present dogma because it's often wrong. When we first proposed the iliac stent trial, in major journals, we were called unethical for even considering a stent trial because balloon angioplasty was perfect in the eyes of radiologists and never worked in the eyes of surgeons. Well, ultimately, we know where that went. Then we used to have a dogma that you would never intervene below the inguinal ligament. In fact, many call that malpractice if you did it. Of course, that changed. Then you would never intervene in the popliteal segment. That's changed. Then never below the knee. That's changed. Then never stick a pedal vessel. That's changed. Then never go below the ankle. That's changed. It goes on and on and on and on. And so I think first and foremost, we were looking for solutions and questioning dogma. Dogma can be very helpful in certain circumstances, but things change as we can develop new devices and new other areas. And really what got me into teaching and becoming so interested in this field is I really got tired of people having amputations that had actual easy solutions to avoid those amputations. Amputations may be necessary and may be life-saving in many patients, but unequivocally worldwide, far too many amputations go on for ischemic disease that really we don't need to do. And this bothers me because it really is associated with profound morbidity, profound mortality, and incredible cost. And so I've been called an evangelist in terms of the peripheral space, and perhaps that's true. I have a real passion for this, and perhaps it dates back to my grandmother who lost a leg and in retrospect probably had very treatable lesions. No one even did an angiogram at the time. That's still going on around the world. So that was my passion for teaching with this, and still remains my passion. You know, we had a session earlier. We're talking about covered stents versus uncovered stents in central vein stenosis. Well, that's fine. But the question is it the covering or is it the stent that's so bad? If we had better mechanical stents that had drug, would those be as good? So many questions need to be asked. And I think my advice to young people is keep an open mind. In solving problems, there are many ways to solve those problems. Pedal approach, we started because limb salvage we couldn't cross from above, not because it just lessened bleeding risk, which many are using it for now, but because we had cases that could not be crossed from above. When I did it once, a surgeon wrote that at a conference, challenged me, and it was the very same surgeon who had advised a below the knee amputation. He said I was going to injure the pedal vessel. And I said, more than the amputation you had suggested. I think it's very important for us to always look at both sides of the equation. If your only option is to cut a leg off, then I think sticking a pedal vessel potentially and saving a limb is certainly a great option. I don't know if it should be used quite as often as it is now. Nonetheless, it is a very viable option and results in limb salvage. So I think we just have to keep a passion. And as a doctor, I've always kept my focus on the patient. My goal is improving patient care. And I'm still very interested in remaining a practicing physician. I have no interest in doing anything else.
You know, one of the things that I learned early on in my career, and I like Professor Cravens and Dr. Walker, had mentors who were giants in the field who gave me opportunities that, frankly, I never thought I would have. One of them sitting over Ashley's shoulder, Professor Dietrich, who had no reason to do anything but ignore me and was an incredibly kind leader who mentored my career, helped me with opportunities. And one of the things I learned early on is you got to publish. Now, I don't consider myself a particularly prolific writer, but it became an important part of my ability to climb the ladder, particularly in the two big places I was in, the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio and Mass General Hospital in Boston. It's a currency that mattered, and I didn't know how to do it. And so my next piece of advice that I'd love the feedback from the panelists is, don't be afraid to ask giants in the field for help and advice. And so I did. I asked Professor Dietrich, I asked Jerry Doros, I asked Bob Grayer, I asked all these people, you know, how can I get to publish? And, you know, it didn't matter that I was the second to last author. It gave me a chance to learn the process, learn how to do it. Ashley, you've got Dr. Dietrich's book over your shoulder for a reason. Perhaps you can tell the audience not only your professional experience with Dr. Dietrich, given that he was the founder of the society that you now represent, but also your personal relationship.
Yeah. Well, since this is a session on shaping your destiny and we're a panel of leaders, Dr. Dietrich, his story is really quite incredible because he is an individual that absolutely shaped his destiny and came from very humble beginnings in Ann Arbor. I first met him at the age of 5 because he was actually my grandmother's boss and she took me to work with her. So I was kind of a little whirling dervish running around Arizona Heart Institute in the late 90s when they were coming out with all these technologies, pulling on these doctors' coats and playing with Symphony as Golden Retriever. And Dr. Dietrich, though, he took me in from a very young age. I was curious, asking questions. I didn't know anything at that age. I would do my best to read through the studies at Icon later on in my elementary years, but to have been impacted by Dr. Dietrich in a way where you've got a very important physician who runs it in, from my 5-year-old perspective, a very important physician who runs a very important meeting, but still would take time out of his day to squat down to my level and answer some questions about what are you doing with those pigs over there? You know, and he'd be like, oh, come in, you can play with this catheter or whatever. And he may not have thought anything of it at the time, but those experiences for me in early childhood had a lifelong impact. So after studying anthropology and working at the Cardiovascular Research Foundation in New York City for a little bit, I found my way back to ISCVS, and it feels like even though I'm kind of in the early stages of my career, this has come full circle in a way that's really, really delicious, because I feel like I am able to kind of channel his persona and the position I'm in now with the society, and kind of honor what the society was, and also continue to adapt us for the future, because I know that's what he would have wanted.
That's fantastic. Professor Crevens, tell us about your perspective on teaching and education, publishing, and mentoring. How important are those aspects to your career now?
I think it's very important. And as main auditorium here is Europeans, I would say if you have chance as a young physician in your career to go to States for some period of training, do it, because that's big difference in both sides of the ocean. And what I learned in the States is how to use 36 hours within one day. So, and how to spend really a lot of time in the hospital and learn. And then it's easy when you come back and may relax and have a glass of wine and drink, you know, and learn and work. So cheers. But really, I'm serious. That's probably, I was proud to spend this so many hours with learning, you know, and then when you're coming back, it's easy to implement and change your work. So, and of course, as the beginning of this meeting, Jan and Gregor said, it's not only serious meeting, I'm serious about wine as well. So I think every vascular specialist, vascular surgeon, cardiologist or radiologist should like the wine. And I really love actually Tom Fogarty wine, one of the best wines. I really love it. Unfortunately, I have no more. It's all of them been, you know, out, but still red wine is very, very helpful in your learning and in your careers.
Well, I look forward to the chance to have a glass of wine with you once the craziness of this world evolves. Craig, I want to give you the last word here. If you're thinking about the situation young physicians coming out of training are facing today, May 2020, in the middle of an unprecedented pandemic, where focus has moved from all the things that are important to us to survival, the economy, what the future looks like. Give us a sense of what you would say to a young physician today looking to the future.
First, I couldn't agree more that publications and presentations are crucial. And within every moment, there are opportunities. So right now we happen to be dealing with a coronavirus epidemic that is causing problems. With that, we have certain problems referable to the vascular system, increased thrombogenicity, questions about how to deal with these patients. Within each of these problems, there are opportunities for publication and to be able to improve healthcare. And so I think it's very important to keep one's mind agile. Now, I agree with Dr. Crevens. I really helped myself out a lot with a bunch of red wine last night, but haven't had any yet this morning. But I think for the young person, stay focused. Try to make sure patients get better care. Try to make sure you help promote the field that you're in so that others learn from you and do a better job, and so that you can learn from others as they find new things. So many former students of mine teach me still, Michael. You know, they will come back with something they've learned I've not thought about and go, gee whiz, that's a great idea. And so there is this give and take and constant learning. And I think we have to be lifelong students. And I think we have to have self-confidence, but at the same time, humility to learn from others. And that's, I think, the way that one succeeds.
Great words of wisdom. Professor Skowronski, thank you again for the privilege of being here. And with all of you, I wish you all great health and happiness, and I'll turn it back to you.